Hey, welcome to the Elle Russ Show. My name is Elle Russ, and I am a #1 best-selling author and master coach. My intention is to inspire, educate, and motivate you with weekly content featuring amazing guests and solo episodes. Visit my website, elleruss.com, to learn more about me, my courses, free masterclasses, partner discounts, and much more. Enjoy the show. Dr. Laura Basha, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Elle.
I'm really looking forward to talking about your new book called The Inward Outlook: Conscious Choice as a Daily Practice. So I guess we'll start with, well, first of all, how did you even reach this point in life where this is the kind of things you talk about and write about and you're a specialist in? How did you get here? What made you curious about these things?
Well, that's a great question. I would say, my childhood was challenging, and I think I naturally was interested in finding a way to feel more grounded and basically feel better about myself. I did find escape when I was young through art. So I've been painting and drawing since I was a girl. But as I matured, I was always interested in metaphysics. And I was always interested, I think in my undergraduate work, I was interested in majoring in psychology. So those were kind of natural proclivities for me, and spirituality. So in my late teens, early 20s, I really started investigating, astrology and tarot and numerology and all those kind of practices called to me. And then when I was in my late 20s, I met a woman who was to become probably the most influential person in my life. That was the Reverend Catherine Jarvis. I dedicated the book to her. She was a Unity minister. I studied with her in Oakland, and she was actually head of the Unity Training School and head of Silent Unity, which was the international prayer ministry. So she taught us how to heal. So in my late 20s and well into my 30s, I studied healing with her. And that became sort of the foundational, probably the true transformational work took place from developing that state of consciousness with her. And then
go ahead.
Well, then I went on and I got my undergraduate work was in fine arts. And then I have to say in the late 60s, I started out studying psychology, but in 1969, 70, the psych department was pretty much out there. And I thought, oh my God, these people are going to help people. So I changed my major to the arts, and we at least acknowledged how crazy we were. And so I got my foundation in fine arts in my undergraduate work, and then eventually went on to get a doctorate in psychology.
What do you mean when we talk about an inward outlook? I think most people right on the surface say, oh, like look within and be aware of one's thoughts. And yours, it's a little bit more than that. So tell us, what is that concept?
Well, it certainly is that. It certainly is being aware that we are human beings, are thinking creatures. We are, the brain is constantly putting out thoughts, just like the mouth produces saliva and the heart beats, the brain thinks. And mostly we don't notice that it's the automatic thinking that we have, that we take our cues from and operate in life from. So to become aware of our thoughts, to be able to notice exactly what we're paying attention to, because what we pay attention to in our thinking is what informs us for the actions that we take. And once we become aware of that, we can become more conscious in terms of our behaviors and our actions and our choices in life. So an inward outlook is actually the practice of becoming more conscious about the choices that you make in life, and choosing those actions, choosing those thoughts to pay attention to that align with who we're actually committed to being, instead of the automatic ways that we're kind of thrown given the circumstances and events that we grew up with and what we made those things mean about ourselves and about others.
If a lot of us are on autopilot, we're going with, tapes replaying, programming from parenting, societal pressures, etc. Where can someone start? Where is the moment they start to go to look at conscious decisions in daily life versus just letting sort of like, the internal subconscious sort of run them? Where do you suggest people start with that? I mean, and can you give us an example? Like, what's something in someone you've coached or someone's life where they had one way of doing it, maybe one way of going, and then they had to kind of stop, assess, and make a different conscious choice?
Yeah, that's a really awesome question. Well, first of all, the book goes into this in more detail, but there's essentially two ways that we can think. There's two ways that we operate in life. And one is through the world of form. You pointed to it, the automatic thinking that we have, which is inputted by us, sort of data that's inputted by us, given, the communities we were raised in, the way our parents saw life, the way the education we had or didn't have, the spiritual or religious upbringing we had, all of those thought systems or mindsets, sort of we start to gather as data from a very young age. And it's really important to gather that data because it creates the identity or the personality that we know ourselves to be, that other people know us to be. But there's also, if you're ever out in nature, or if you're someone who's interested in sports and you really kind of get in the groove or the zone with music or with the arts or with sports or with maybe even just being on vacation and sitting on the beach, where you're not really thinking about anything. You're not paying attention to all that automatic thinking. You're actually really present with what's happening. Just noticing the surf beating on the sand, or being with young children and the joy of just being present with young children, or being out in nature. That's a whole other way of accessing thought, if you will. That's sort of the formless eternal self that we are. So once you can distinguish those moments, and probably everyone has had at least some experience of being really still and present in the moment, that's a listening that you can cultivate. And that's the realm of infinite intelligence and omniscient wisdom and omnipotent love. It's all the attributes that we're looking for. We actually already have, but we don't quiet the mind enough to have them become available to us. We're mostly so focused on those automatic ways of thinking that the thought kind of the automatic thinking determines how we're living. So to start, if you distinguish the one place where you know that you aren't paying attention to thinking and you're really quiet and peaceful, and then notice when other thoughts come in, or notice when you're not feeling quiet and peaceful. And when you are not feeling quiet and peaceful, maybe you're anxious or you're worried or you're frustrated, see if you can distinguish what thinking you're actually paying attention to. And the moment you can distinguish that thinking, the part of you that's distinguishing that thinking is actually that eternal self. And you can shift your attention away from that. If the best thing you can do is to stop doing what you're doing and go for a walk, just practice breaking free of that automatic thinking and getting back to that quiet mind.
And this doesn't mean, as you say, it's not to say that everybody's going to get to a place where there's zero reactions and everybody's just smooth sailing and in a meditation, living through life, right? I mean, the point is we're going to have those reactions pop up, but they lessen and lessen over time with this practice.
Well, that's accurate. And listen, life was meant to be challenging. Life was not meant to be, have no problems. The opportunity for dealing with problems is what has us grow and develop and evolve. And that's the nature of the universe, is to evolve. So I've been working with this for 40 plus years. No, you're never off the hook. I was just sharing earlier that we just moved. There are so many breakdowns and so many situations that, like, unfulfilled expectations and thwarted intentions that show up.
That's right.
So there's always an opportunity to practice. And what the benefit of that is to be able to hone your capacity to get back to being present in the moment, not making these things mean anything, not listening to the stories that we make up about them. You want an example? I'll give you an example of just a couple of weeks ago. We bought this little house, and on the surface, it looked like it was a really good deal. And right now it looks like we bought the most expensive fixer-upper that I have had. And there were so many disappointments, and I watched myself kind of nosedive with all those sellers. They knew that they were getting away with something. I mean, I was just like making people wrong, and I was at the effect of it, and I was the victim. Being a victim is a really powerful place to be, because, then you don't have to be responsible for the choices that you've made, and you can blame it on someone else. You see this everywhere. Turn on the TV and watch the news. It's kind of rampant, but it's a natural tendency for human beings to go in that direction. So when you know that, you can catch yourself choosing them, and you can, what I did was I said, okay, Laura, listen, you made a choice. You did your due diligence. Stuff happens. This is what you're dealing with. Now what? So just kind of getting present to, this is the deal. What do we need to do? Just takes all the emotion, all the upset out of it, and then gives you a course of action to move forward.
Well, and it's calling out the facts of the situation, right? It's like, hey, hold on, let's review. I am not a victim. And let's go through all the reasons I'm not a victim. And then onward and upward, failure being feedback, not a chance to rip on yourself. And on the heels of that, let's talk about self-compassion. Explain to everyone, why is it so easy for some of us, a lot of us, to be compassionate and kind to others, but not to ourselves? And then what are some suggestions on how someone can take a look at that and fix it?
Yeah, that's a really great question. If we're finding that we have empathy or compassion for other people, but then we're really hard on ourselves, this is actually, I'm going to give you kind of a general response, because this would be very specific given who I was talking to in their specific situation. But in general, if you're being kinder to someone else, there may be some kind of pressure you put on yourself to be accepted, to do it right, to make somebody else feel good. And so you will kind of rise to the occasion with other people. But what you haven't done is really taken a moment to look at, how are you judging yourself? What kind of judgments or, pressure are you putting on yourself to be perfect or to do it right? All of us have these habitual ways of sort of defending ourselves, and habitual ways of putting ourselves down that we learned when we were kids. A lot of the way that we operate now in life comes from the strategy developed by an upset 4-year-old. But we forget we created these strategies when we were that young, and we just go on operating and we wonder why they're not working. So for a 4-year-old, it was a brilliant strategy because you have to figure out how to get along with these big people that your survival depends on. But as a 30-year-old, a 50-year-old, a 70-year-old, you don't have to be operating that way anymore. So the more that you can quietly look at the patterns of limitation that you have created for yourself without judgment, that's a key. We want to look at ourselves without judgment, and we can start to make some more conscious choices about how to deal with a situation. An example of myself, I can consistently go back and remember a very young conversation, which goes something like, you better do it right or you're going to get in trouble. And that shows up in all sorts of unusual guises as I'm an elder at this stage in life. But once I can kind of distinguish that it goes back to that little kid who was afraid of getting in trouble, because trouble meant, it was not good. I'm sort of freed up. It's like shining the light on that old thought that's not serving me anymore, and then being able to release it and make a different choice.
Yeah, I have one that I actually, it had been a long time, but it came up the other day. And so this is whenever I get the choked up feeling in my throat, I know that is from my past issues with being vulnerable as an alpha female. And so I have learned, though, that, I'd get choked up. I'd want to run away from the situation or not express myself. And I know that that's not good. And so I've practiced that over time. If I feel the feeling, and it happened to me not too long ago, I got kind of choked up feeling in the throat. And it was that moment where I was like, hold on, whoa, this is your warning sign. What are you choked up about? What do you need to express? And then now what's the best way to express it, right? Like I had to go through that. It just takes a minute versus letting that pattern of the choked up feeling just keep letting me run off and not address my vulnerability issues. Life is so much better. Life is so much better. Now, that's not to say that when it happens, it's still not fun for me, right? It's not fun for anyone in that situation to go, oh, damn it. Like, I don't want to speak up, but I know I have to because I know that the alternative is just a terrible pattern that continues to ruin my life. So therefore, now I have to do it. And so, you have to kind of like, sometimes it's a little bit of a forced thing, just like it is for me when I don't feel like working out. And it's not about me being exhausted. It's just like I'm mentally drained or whatever. And I go, no, what are you doing? Like, get out there. So this is work, but I can say from personal experience that at least like that one thing that I gave the example of has been an absolute life changer for me, Laura.
Yes, that's the inward outlook and action, really. And it's the hardest work, but it's the most rewarding work. And I never want to. Every morning it's like I don't want to work out. It's like, thank you for sharing. Now go work out. It's
right.
It's like there's the tape loop. But you just sort of say, don't listen to it. I mean, yeah, very good. That's a great example of the inward outlook where you can notice that you noticed that you were caught up in an old pattern of thought. And
what is the law? Let's talk about the law of thought, how you talk about that. And you sort of refer to it. It's thinking creates each person's experience of life. Of course, our thoughts about our perceptions are going to affect the way we internalize it. But if you can unwrap that for everybody and give us a clear rundown.
Yeah, a clear rundown. I know what I was going to say, though, Elle. I think it's so awesome that you pointed to that old pattern that you have. And it's just brilliant that you have a podcast show. So
great to talk.
That's brilliant. The law of thought. The law of thought essentially means that how you think is how you're going to experience life. So let me go a little deeper with that. The deeper sort of unraveling of the law of thought is that the condition of consciousness determines the quality of thought. So, for example, I meditate. So I practice in a circumstance where nothing's going on. I'm alone. I'm not going to be interrupted. It's very quiet. And so I practice getting really present and clearing my head of thought. Now, the benefit of doing that practice, at least for me, is that then when I'm in life and things show up, like, for example, moving into this house and dealing with all the stuff we're dealing with, it gives me a kind of ballast. It's a buffer to my own reactivity and to the reactivity of others, because I've practiced being still with that quiet mind. So that's a way of conditioning the consciousness to start receiving the best quality of thinking that I can have. Now, that's not the only way to do that. You can practice being quiet. You might have a window over your sink, and as you're doing the dishes, you just are sort of gazing out the window and noticing the trees or the birds or whatever. There's different ways to practice just being present and quiet in the moment. But the more that you do that, however one chooses to do that, you're conditioning your consciousness to be able to access the highest quality of thought when you're confronted with something, like maybe something you see on the news, or maybe a relationship issue that is kind of off the wall, hits you out of the blue. You have a kind of equilibrium and a kind of unflappable capacity to not lose your bearings and to look for the best. Maybe not look for the victim in yourself, or not listen to the judgment that might be there. So the law of thought is that how you think, what you're paying attention to, the thinking that you're paying attention to, the quality of thinking you're paying attention to, gives you your experience of life.
It's beautiful. I wish more. I love. Everyone's on their phones. We know this. That I try not to be. I do live in nature. When you're talking about even just like looking at the ocean and listening to the waves, I like everybody out there, like, where has the curiosity gone, right? When you're younger, you're sitting in front of the ocean, sometimes you're curious, like, oh, that's, the waves, the tide, what's that bird, what's this happening? It's just sort of like time to wonder. We don't really have that anymore, right? Kids are on schedules. They don't have time to just go like make a fort in their bedroom and like pretend, right? Yeah. It's such a, in fact, in that way, I am so grateful, as I'm sure you are, that I wasn't raised with social media and all these things where, you could just go out of the house and you didn't have a phone. And now, granted, it's a little safer now maybe to keep track of the kids, but I love, most of my creative inspirations and my solutions to whatever's ailing me in life has come from quiet thought, staring at a tree, staring at a view, staring at an ocean, right?
Yes.
It's not only healthy, good for your immune system to be in nature, but again, turning it off and like turning on the curiosity, the questioning about the world that we're living in versus what do I need to put on the list for the grocery store?
Yes. Well, we as particularly in Western society are besotted with the intellect. Human beings like to know. We don't like to not know. And so we have become, I would say, over addicted to knowing things. And certainly technology, even though it's brilliant, we can do something like this when we're in different cities, but there's also the downside of technology. And particularly with, younger generations who were not raised to work things out face to face. I was talking to an artist friend a while back. She said, we're the last generation that first of all has privacy, but also that if you were going to say something to somebody, you had to say it to their face and you had to see the impact and you had to work it out with them. So there was this relational quality that is kind of disappearing. The thing about practicing, boy, this is actually a big question, Elle, but the thing about practicing being quiet is that quiet mind, or that formless eternal self that we really are, as opposed to this temporal body that we're walking around in. There's a shelf life to it. As soon as you're born, you're aging, and there's an end to this particular story called Laura or called Elle, and there's a bunch of data points that created me being who I am now. But that's only for 80, 90, who knows how many years, maybe less, I don't know. But the eternal self, that formless self, that has access to infinite intelligence, that's the realm of genius. That's the realm of healing and peace of mind and compassion. That's where Albert Einstein listened from. That's where Michelangelo listened from. That's why you say when you get your most creative, inspired thinking, it's because you're listening for what you don't know. And it behooves us to become more and more graceful in not knowing and just being present and listening. Now, the larger piece I'll point to in that is there's two energies in the universe. One is love and one is fear, and love is the greater. And what we're seeing now, particularly at this very confronting time in history, is that fear is kind of running the show. There's actually just as much positive happening as negative, but the negative or the fear-based is just a lot louder. It makes a lot of noise. And so people get addicted to that. There's something very addictive about going for fear, because if you're going for fear, you don't have to be responsible for creating what's happening in your life. And fear has all sorts of, constraint and pressures and exclusions. Love is all inclusive. Love sees only love. And love is not the sort of, romantic thing we talk about. It's partly that, but love is the harmonizing, unifying energy of the universe. And it's the most powerful. And so the call to us now in history, which is why I'm doing these podcasts and why I wrote this book and got it out again, and why you do what you do, I'm going to boldly say, is to bring more love and compassion and understanding into the consciousness of humanity.
I love it. That's what an admirable endeavor. I would love to get into the topic of humor. You talk about humor continuum, transformational humor.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Well, transformational humor, it's funny, everybody loves that. I kind of think it's because we're really wanting to see more of that lightheartedness, and it's available. It's always available. So transformational humor is a natural characteristic of the inward outlook. When you're practicing being present in the moment with no attention to thinking from the past, this characteristic of transformational humor naturally emerges. So I talk about humor in the book in a way that's sort of this humor continuum. Like there's one end of the humor continuum, which is, people sort of making jokes at someone else's expense, which basically is taking advantage of the vulnerabilities of our fellows. And the other end of the continuum is what I'm calling transformational humor. And that's this compassionate, lighthearted capacity to understand the frailties and foibles of what it means to be a human being, because you've done the work on yourself. So you're not so judgmental about your other people in your life, because you have some humility about what has us show up and not be at our best, shall we say. And so when we start to do the work on ourselves without judgment and start appreciating that these defenses we have and these reactivities we have and these behaviors that aren't really who we're committed to being, we have some compassion for ourselves, because we realize that we're just doing the best we can. And given the way we see life, we make choices. And as we start doing that with ourselves, we start taking other people and other people's perceptions less personally. We realize that people approach life with a grid over our eyeballs, and that grid over our eyeballs is the past, the way we perceived life and what we make things mean. And the more we start disengaging from what we've made stuff mean, the more lighthearted we become, and the more compassionate we become to our fellows. So we can actually be in a crisis situation. I've been in many in my life. Most people have as they get older. Nobody gets off the hook from life. But as we engage in these situations, and they could be life-threatening, or they could be as much as being confronted with thwarted intentions of buying a house, that we have this kind of ease and capacity to weather and roll with what's happening without judgment. And that transforms our experience. And it also transforms the experience of the people around us.
Yeah. I wanted to highlight a couple things about humor. Two things that need to go for everyone listening. Number one, self-deprecating humor, unless it's really, truly like spirited in a fun way. Because that is, just the people that are walking around and something happens, they go, it's just my luck, or, making jokes about their own things. And sometimes that can come off right. But, I would just say to everyone, watch how much you're doing that, where you're ripping on yourself for a laugh or something for others. And it's really hard to be on the other side of watching someone be self-deprecating. The other point I'd like to make is sarcasm sucks. It's not humor. It's shitty, antagonistic, pokey behavior. It's not comedy. You never watch a comedy that's hilarious and there's it's all sarcasm. It's not. It's situational. It's the foibles we live in life. It's hyper reality. A lot of it is not sarcasm. And so I just wanted to say those two things because I think people mix those up, and also they might need to be just a little bit more aware of them making jokes about themselves in a negative way.
Yeah, it's a really fair point to make. It's a good point to make. Sarcasm is basically an expression of anger.
Right.
And self-deprecation is a way to put yourself down. So both of those, there's something similar in both of those that you point to, which is making yourself wrong or making others wrong or judging them, rather than having compassion for, really it's a catchphrase. I already said it once, but it's true. Everybody's doing the best they can. If they knew better, they would do better. And that's true for all of us. We can only make choices based on the state of consciousness that we have. So the more self-aware we are, the bigger a contribution we are to others, and the nicer life we have, the nicer we can experience life. We human beings have practiced growing and developing through suffering. And it's actually possible to grow and develop through joy. And what this conversation, what we're pointing to and what the inward outlook points to, is the possibility of growing and developing and dealing with life's challenges from a place of joy rather than a place of fear and suffering. And one of the things I would say that the inward outlook and practicing the nuances of it alleviates suffering. It doesn't alleviate the challenges of life. It's not gonna have life be less challenging, but it will have life be more joyful, more compassionate, and richer.
I know I've some of my listeners are probably like, yeah, we've heard it before, Elle, but I'm just going to say this also too on humor, which is people aren't watching enough of it. Okay. I mean, some of the friends that I know that are struggling with sleep or kind of have a downer mentality in life are the ones that are watching horror movies every single night. I mean, now listen, if you can watch a horror movie and have it not affect you, that's great. I would argue that you might want to do a little bit of a fast on stuff like that, right? I have someone I know who can't get to sleep every night, but they're watching Law and Order episodes before they go to bed. And I'm like, well, what do you think sleeping in your subconscious, rapes, murders, and all the stuff that we know that's out there that's bad, and yet you're making the conscious choice to fill your subconscious with that. we know how healing laughter is, right? So guys, if you're in a downer mood, you need to do the inward outlook. Start with watching some stand-up comedy and some light shows, or, looking up good news or cute, dog videos, anything that's going to spark that type of joy or feeling within you. Just sometimes we get off course. With me, myself, I rarely watch dramas. I'm a comedy person, but I'll get into a drama or something, and then it'll be like a couple seasons in, and I start to notice that I'm kind of like, in life. And then I'm like, well, hold on. Well, what have I been watching? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's always related. And I'm always like, okay, I need to like shift it. Or if I'll watch something that's, like, oof, put you on edge, then I always top it off with some comedy before I go to bed or something, or I'll watch it at a different time of day, all with the intention of protecting my subconscious mind.
That's really wise. It's really a good point. I mean, if you're filling your, look, if you if you're sitting around and all you're eating is sugar and carbs,
right,
eventually you're not going to feel very good. And so if you're filling your thinking with that quality of thought, you're programming yourself. So very, very fair point. It doesn't.
It seems like a lot of those. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it doesn't mean you can't enjoy Law and Order, but maybe watch it at 4:00 instead of 10:00.
Right. Or give yourself a break and do every other night, do comedy or something. I mean, it's just, it's also what I find too is especially, well, any kind of psychological drama, so as a writer and as someone who writes sitcoms and screenplays and stuff, one of the easiest things in the world to write, I mean, give credit, you got to have good dialogue and stuff. But one of the easiest things to write is drama. You know why? You can just throw in anything negative and it works. Like, what do we do? Oh, let's make him a drug addict. I had to write a drama series one time for some producers, and I was so bummed by the end of it because I'm a comedy writer. And in general, I was sitting there and we were like, my writing partner and I were like, God, this is a downer, man. All you're doing is thinking of the worst of humanity. You watch these reality shows and it is really sort of the worst of human characteristics. Like, why are we allowing this to get into our mind? I would just please watch it, everybody. I know they can be like crack, but it may be affecting you. And while you're doing the inward outlook work, and please go get Dr. Laura Basha's book, try to do a 30, 60-day, drama fast, or, lay low and switch it up with some comedy. And that's my last thoughts on that.
I think it's brilliant. It really is brilliant. And anyway, thank you, Elle. This has been really fun talking to you, and really, I really appreciate it.
Well, tell us. I mean, we'll put all of the things in the show notes to connect with you, but it's called The Inward Outlook: Conscious Choice as a Daily Practice. And then give us your website so that we can find you and all of the things you have to offer.
Well, I'd love to do that. And it's funny, you were talking about humor and how it's so uplifting. I designed the website for people to get hit with beauty, because when you're hit with beauty, the quality of your thinking goes up. So even if you don't read anything on it, I think you'll find it very beautiful. It's www.whitebirdrising.com. And I put in the 3 W's because there's some music groups in Europe called Whitebird Rising or something. So you might come up with something else, but that's the website. And the books are on there. I've got 3 books actually. And so this is one of them, but you'll find a lot of I've got videos and podcasts and stuff on the website. So if you want to put your feet up and have a glass of wine, it'd be a fun watch.
I love it. Your website is beautiful. And on that note, I had the same thought when I published my first book, The Paleothyroid Solution. Of course, for people suffering, right? They're suffering with a health ailment. It feels horrible to be hypothyroid. And I made the physical book just a beautiful, like tropical, because I thought, you're suffering, you're hating it. Like I was hating it when I was suffering. Like I just want people to get like the vibe, so I love that was your intention. Thank you so much for joining us. Any last thoughts before we go?
Well, no, I guess I would just say, given what you were just saying, that it's possible to really navigate the challenges of life without suffering, but actually from joy. And I just really appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much, Elle.
Thank you. And for everyone else, we'll see you next week. Hey listeners, over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my number one source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/Elle Russ for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products, and I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.